Hi again, Mark here from TalkingBass. Now, soloing. Solo improvisation. It's one of those things that bass players just find really hard to get into. Obviously, if you don't care about learning to solo, then it doesn't matter, right? But if you want to learn how to be more melodic in your playing, whatever the style, there's a special something that you need to understand. Is it chord tones? No. Is it scales? No. Is it anything to do with the notes at all? Nope. Obviously, the notes are pretty darn important when you start creating your lines, but that special something that you need to address right from the start, that thing that binds everything together from the notes to the rhythms to the expression, is phrasing. Every musical line that you hear is presented as a phrase. It's no different to speech. You can know all the words that you like, but without the ability to craft a sentence, you're going to find it pretty hard to use them. So today we're going to look at the absolute basics of phrasing and how we can use simple phrases as a vehicle for then adding in all of that knowledge of chord tones and scales as we develop our improvisational skills. This lesson is taken from the brand new course over at TalkingBass called The Creative Bassist. It takes you on a journey through every element of creativity on the bass, from simple bassline creation through riffs, fills, melodic playing and soloing. It's a huge course that emphasizes application right from the start, so you get to know the why behind building your harmony and rhythm knowledge. So check out the course via the link below. There's a 25% discount during this release week, and now let's have a little look at some phrasing basics. All melodies are built from phrases. We've already looked at melodies in the previous module, and each melody that we covered can be broken down into distinct individual phrases. So if we take the jazz standard All of Me as an example, we start with a phrase, then another phrase, another phrase, another phrase. Then for Autumn Leaves, we've got a phrase, another phrase, etc. Musical phrasing follows the same kind of patterns that we see in regular speech. We don't just speak in one long succession of words going on and on forever with no pauses like this and continuing on and on, because eventually we have to take a pause. We need a full stop. We make a point, we ask a question, we pause. Soloing is the same. Now, you obviously can play a continuous stream of 16th notes throughout an entire solo, but it can be quite exhausting for the listener and the improviser. You might do that for a certain effect, but most solos and general melodies will contain some distinct separate phrases. So over a basic C blues, I might start with a simple phrase like this, then continue with another phrase like this, and then carry on with some more phrases. Now, in terms of the construction of phrases, we do have a few things to think about from a note perspective. Every phrase has a starting note. Every phrase has a final note. If it's a two-note phrase, then that's it. But any more notes, and you've got a little journey from that start to the end. So you've got a start, a middle, and an end. Also, every phrase takes up a certain amount of time. We might have a phrase that takes up a whole bar, and that's including the space before, within, and after it. There could also be multiple phrases played within a single bar, or a single chord in a chord progression. They can also span multiple chords, and in some instances, there might be multiple phrases chained together with no gaps. In the Billy's Bounce solo from the last lesson, it could be argued that the first line contains multiple phrases. You could also consider that line a single phrase. Phrasing is not always so obviously cut and dried. It won't always be phrase, gap, phrase, gap, That in itself could be quite boring or predictable. But when starting out with soloing, it is worth approaching your improvisation in terms of more distinct phrases. Apart from anything else, it's going to be a lot less pressurizing. Improvising longer phrases or chaining them together across chords is great, but you need to start simple. As well as the length of phrase, we also need to consider the direction. So when you start improvising a phrase, you select a starting point, which might be the root or the third or the fifth of a chord. But what's the next most immediate thing that we have to do? Well, we have to go up or down. You could stay on one note, which is fine, but let's face it, most musical phrases will move at some point. So do we go up or do we go down? So here's a phrase going up. And here's a phrase going down. Then, will the overall direction be up or down? Just because we played down on the first note doesn't mean the overall direction is down. There may be an overall arc or undulation to the line. So here's a phrase that goes a little up and then down. So we basically pick a starting point, we take a journey until we arrive at our destination, which is our final note of the phrase. This is, at the most basic level, how phrases are constructed. Yes, we can get a lot more specific about the intervals, scales, chord tones, sequences, and all of that stuff, but at the most basic oral level, the phrase is a journey from one place to another. Then, beyond the length and direction of a phrase, we can also look at how the phrases relate to each other. This is the bigger picture. Solos will often begin more sparse and then build to a climax. The phrases might become more dense. They might start to ascend over time. They might become shorter and more agitated. They also might become longer and more free-flowing. So you might start out with shorter phrases like this. And by the end, you might have denser, longer lines like this. You'll often find that there's a question and answer sequence or call and response, especially at the start of a solo like this. So we might have the initial phrase, and then the second phrase, and then the phrases will build from that seed. As you listen to more and more solos, you'll be able to hear how the improvising musicians make use of all the various musical elements to construct an overall musical journey. The greatest improvisers can create what you might consider a beautiful or epic musical novel over a 20-minute period. Obviously, this is all performed instinctively and on the fly. There's no pre-planning, it's improvisation. Again, this is something worth considering when learning a transcribed solo. Look at how your favourite musicians construct an improvisation on the smaller phrase-by-phrase level and also on the overall macro level. So now let's look at a short solo that I've written for this lesson that features phrases of varying lengths. Transcription of this solo is there in the lesson material, so you can just work through the notes provided, but let's just have a quick look at the individual phrases at work and the direction taken. So the solo takes place over a G7 chord, so we're using the G7 arpeggio and the G Mixolydian scale, and there's some chromatic notes in there for good measure. So we begin with this phrase. So starting at the fifth, the D, working up, F, F sharp, G, and then we've got that little B flat to B natural. So got the chromatic note in there, and it's just that little bluesy minor to major third. So it's very popular in bluesy kind of solos and jazz. But it's a very short phrase. Just one phrase on its own, just to start things off. Then we have the answer phrase. So that's just the D, the F, grace note leading into the G and back down to the F. So it's all chord tones there. Again, short phrase, call and answer. Then we have this longer line made up of a set of smaller phrases all chained together. So you could see it as one whole phrase, but it is actually a set of phrases all chained together. So we've got the B to the A, so that's the third of the chord leading to the second or ninth. So we're accenting that flavour note in there. There's a lot of flavour in that ninth. Root to the seventh. Again, the seventh is the flavour note that we're accenting. Then the fifth up to the seventh again, sliding into the fifth there. So again, seventh, the flavour, and then down to the D, the fifth of the chord. So we're not accenting the root note at any point here. There's too much resolution on the root. We're actually looking for the flavour notes here. So that's the first 4 bars of the phrase. We've got a call and a response, and then we've got this extra chained phrase. So all of that together. Then for the next 4 bars, we've got something very similar. We've got the initial phrase. So it's almost a repeat of that first phrase. So the first one had this little chromatic passing note leading up to the root note, but this time we have, so we've got 5th, 7th, 5th, and then we've got that minor to major third again. So it finishes with the same 2 notes. Then we have a response phrase. So that's root note, the G, up to the 5th, back, and then the 7th. So again, the finishing note of the phrase is the 7th. Then we finish with this long phrase. So, like I said, this solo has got short phrases and long phrases, and this is a pretty long phrase. So, again. So this is still using all the same resources for that G7. We've got the chord tones, we've got the mixolydian, and we've got some chromatic notes. So we start on that 5th, we work up. So we've got G and then the B, so we're working up through that G mixolydian. Then we've got the minor to major third, that, you know, we've got that little move there. But then we continue up, so we're outlining the G triad there, but we've got the chromatic approach into the third, and then we just fill in the gap with that sharp 4 leading up into the 5th. So just think of the mixolydian scale, but we're just filling in the gaps. That's all we're doing. And then when we reach up to that 5th, we come down chromatically. But then when we reach the B flat, we jump up again, up to that major third. So we got that move, and down to the G. So in isolation, there it is again. But then after hitting the G, we come down through the F and the D. So then we've got the F down to the E, so we're coming down through that mixolydian, down to the C, so the 4th there, up to the D, so it's an approach note into the 5th, then B flat to B, it's that minor to major third again, that bluesy move, and then up to the root note, the G. So that's the final cadence of the phrase. We're landing on the root note finally. So, and you can hear it's got that real cool bluesy move. Minor to major third, up to that root note. And if you're just going to take that tiny phrase, just by itself, you can use that in so many different solos. It becomes a part of your vocabulary. So again, that full line, 1, 2, 3. So you can use full phrases, or you can just use parts of phrases to develop that vocabulary. So you could just take that first phrase in there. You know, just that. You can take that phrase, you can assimilate it there into your vocabulary and use it over dominant 7 chords. Here we're playing over that G7. But if you were to play it, let's say, over an F7, so, you know, just play it over different chords. Just take that full phrase. You can use it again. Use it, change the rhythm. You know, just however you want to use it. Play around with the rhythms, play around with the notes, but it all is still developing that vocabulary. And then on a longer phrase, you know, you don't have to take that whole phrase. If you were to take that whole phrase and then just start using it all the time, you know, it'd be pretty noticeable. But just taking small parts, just the first few notes, just using that, or just those little notes in there. This is how you take those transcriptions, you know, as you're learning solos, and create vocabulary from it. So that's a basic overview of what phrases are and how they work within a solo. But next we're going to get right down to basics and get creative. We're going to start improvising our own solo, starting with the most basic of notes, the chord tones.